know, there's some undeniable truths of life. There's some things that are just fact and they're beyond dispute. You know, the sun rises in the east, it sets in the west, the sky is blue, the Cubs will never win a World Series, and the Vikings will never win a Super Bowl. I mean, there's just undeniable truths in life. Well, I've come up with another one. This is no question an undeniable truth in life. Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States of America, is mentally unbalanced. There's no question he is mentally unbalanced, ladies and gentlemen. What he says here on Meet the Press, I had to watch it like 9 times. I'm gonna humor everybody. I had to watch this like 9 times I really now think he believes what he's saying. I'm gonna humor the Vice President and actually take him seriously for some of the things he says right here. We got, what do we got, about 5 clips here? I don't know that we'll get to them all. Probably, I'll try to squeeze them all in. First question from David Gregory is about the tax cut compromise. Now, of course, it was not a tax cut compromise. No taxes got cut. Forget what Biden says here for a minute. It was an extension of the existing tax rates. And that's critical to understand that we prevented a tax hike. We didn't cut taxes. But Gregory asked Biden what this means for jobs. And listen to this exchange here between David Gregory and the Vice President. Watch this.
2.5%, some suggested grow as high as 4%. That means employment. That means more people employed, number one. Number two, this wasn't just extending the Bush-era tax cuts. It extended all the tax cuts for the middle class and all the tax cuts for the poor that were in our legislation, the Obama legislation. We came up with a tax cut of 2% for everybody who gets a payroll check. And on their, not the employer, the employee gets a 2%. For example, someone making $60,000 a year is going to get another $1,200 on top of the middle class tax cut. We continued all those tax cuts for the working poor, the so-called EITC, Earned Income Tax Credits, and maybe most importantly, we were able to extend for another 13 months unemployment insurance for those devastated by this recession.
Okay, now, once again, ladies and gentlemen, stick with me here. I'm going to try to take the Vice President seriously. Now, I prefer to just ignore this guy. And President Obama, if you can take some advice from me, and I'm going to give it because I know you're not smart enough to listen to me, I'd take the Vice President, send him on a 6-month goodwill trip to Africa or something. He doesn't help you in any way, shape, or form. This man does not help you. Now, let's think about what he said. This is the guy who a year and a half ago claimed the recession was over. This is the guy 6 months ago who talked about recovery summer. So I don't know what credibility he has to speak on the economy. Again, we're going to try to take him seriously. Think about what he said for a minute. Now, the Democratic position is that we got to raise taxes on those evil rich people. Yeah, that guy's screwing you. We're going to get him for you. That's the Democratic position. In the very same breath, the Vice President claims that preventing these tax increases will cause 4% growth instead of, what did he say, 2%? Or 2.5%? Well, Mr. Biden, if that's true, then what you've said about raising taxes on the so-called wealthy is false. How do you have it both ways? And I love this. I love this. They're doing a 2% payroll tax cut. Of course, they're not doing it for employers who pay. Remember, they match your FICA payments. Only for employees. Well, if that's such a great idea, why is it only temporary? I mean, basically, he's arguing for tax cuts, and in the very same breath, he's arguing for tax increases. And again, the whole thing about unemployment, the whole idea that, you know, paying somebody to not work stimulates the economy. I mean, I'll tell you, the Democrats might want to go back to their think tanks and focus groups and rethink that position a little bit. It's so ludicrous, it's so ridiculous to even, and now whether people need unemployment or how long they have to be, that's a different debate. But the idea that that's economic, to give people 13 months, unemployment has now been extended 5 times. When does it end? Does it ever end? More unemployment, more unemployment. Now, you don't want to get a job? Here's free money. Here's my money. Here, just have it. Well, then, you know, and David Gregory tries to do a Tim Russert impersonation here. He's nowhere near as good as Mr. Russert, but he basically hits on Mr. Biden that this is a broken promise. You know, of course, the president promised, like I said, to get those evil rich people, you know, like I said, are screwing you. They're the ones that are, you know, putting you in a soup kitchen. Well, is it a broken promise? Is it a broken promise, Mr. Vice President? Watch this. Watch.
Well, in September, you were interviewed by my colleague Rachel Maddow, and you had an exchange about this fight over extending the tax cut for wealthier Americans. Let me play a portion of that.
Does that mean that letting the Bush tax cuts expire for the richest people in the country while pushing for their extension and middle-class tax cut for everybody else, is that a black and white issue? Is that we haven't heard a veto threat, for example, from the president on it.
It is a black and white.
It's a black and white issue. That's something that the administration is going to go to the mat for.
Absolutely.
That was September.
By the way,
January didn't go to the mat.
By the way, we did go to the mat. We did go to the mat. We went through I went into a total of 130 races out there, campaigning for Democrats. Every single race I made this case. Here's what happened. We got to the end, we couldn't get it done, and we had to make a decision. Were we going to let the middle-class tax cuts expire? Let me remind everybody, the House passed middle-class tax cut only. It got to the United States Senate. We supported that provision, and the Senate could not pass it. So now we're left with, do we let those folks who are going to bed tonight staring at the ceiling wondering whether they're going to be in that same bed next month? Are those 2 million people who already lost their unemployment insurance this month, 7 million more losing it next month, and economic uncertainty occur? Life is a matter of really tough choices.
Okay, first thing I want to pick up on here, of course, Mr. Biden implies everything is a crisis. It's a crisis. We have to, the ship's going to sink if we don't do this deal. You know, Democrats, we've known since 2003 that these tax cuts were going to sunset on January 1st, 2011. It's not anything new, Mr. Vice President. I mean, where the hell have you been? The Democrats have been in control of Congress for 4 years. They aren't anymore. They've been in control of the White House for 2 years. You could have passed this stuff anytime you wanted. You could have done a tax cut deal a year ago, 2 years ago, if this was so important. Fact is, you guys gambled. You gambled. That's your rhetoric, your rich versus. This is what liberals do. They put people into groups, and then they pit the groups against each other. You got rich versus poor. You got old versus young. You got white versus black. You got men versus women. And then they got business versus labor. And they want everybody to pick sides and then go at each other. Same thing on this tax debate. The whole rich versus poor, which is usually what liberals argue when they have no other argument. They'll go back to tax cut for the wealthy. Same old push-button things. These people haven't had a new idea since Moby Dick was a minnow.